All right, now that we've briefly touched on the familiarization phase, a few of the jargon, cliches, and things that you should know before getting started, that leads us to our third section, which is in fact getting started, which is probably what most of you are here for and kind of interested in if you are new to the space. Like I said before, this is a massive barrier to entry that usually stops most individuals. A lot of people that I've talked to are interested in getting started. They try to sign up for one exchange, they try to purchase some Bitcoin or Ethereum. Something doesn't get verified, they run into an issue, and they just kind of give up. There's a lot of confusion in this space. There's kind of a lot of barriers to entry, and that really is a problem. So we're going to kind of address some of those concerns, give you the best on-ramps and kind of the best way of being successful and just generally getting started. I really do recommend that individuals start getting started and like signing up sooner rather than later. I know a lot of people who, when the price is going up extremely quickly, they decide that now is the time that they want to buy in. A lot of these exchanges require like a lot of bank requirements, like know your customer and anti-money laundering requirements, and they have to be compliant with those. And that requires a lot of kind of formal verification and submission of documents and manual reviewing. And you really don't want to be going through that process when 40, 50, 60,000 other people are trying to do it at the same time. I know one individual who, in this most recent run-up a couple of weeks ago, tried to kind of apply for one of the exchanges, and I think it was recently, maybe a day ago, that he actually got approved for the platform. So don't be that individual. Kind of plan ahead and kind of prepare yourself for when you want to make that investment, when you want to start actively trading. Like I said before, it's usually kind of necessary to buy Bitcoin or Ethereum before trading on some of these other exchanges. I'm going to go into that a little bit more in these next slides, but this is kind of just a general on-ramp, a brief overview of the exchanges that you might want to be interested in using, and that you can use to kind of make a plan to figure out what would be the best ones for you to sign up for, depending on what you're interested in doing. I also wanted to point out that you should be aware that a lot of these exchanges are going to require your social security number, a picture of your ID or your passport, and even sometimes a picture of you holding your ID next to your face. It seems fairly invasive, but there are, like I said, a lot of compliance issues around it, and kind of a lot of issues with them, making sure that they're on the up and up with whatever regulating body they kind of fall under. So just be aware that this is kind of normal. It definitely is invasive. So I want to kind of preface that with the fact that you should not be sending a copy of your passport or your social security number to some random exchange that you found online. Especially when you first start out, I would recommend staying with some more of the, not necessarily legitimate, but kind of like more well-established and well-known, possibly even US-based or one that kind of based in your country, in case you run into some issues. It will just make that much easier to kind of interface with them and deal with any issues that might arise. I think that security in this space is really paramount. It's something that you should absolutely be focused on. If you're on an exchange and it's not necessarily the best security, that really is an issue. That's kind of how I decide a lot on what exchanges I use. If you've been in the space for a while, then you're kind of aware that a lot of hacks have happened, that there have been a lot of issues with security, and you really don't want to kind of end up in that boat. So one of the things I highly recommend for everyone is to enable two-factor authentication. I think that this is a very valuable security. It's kind of the standard in the industry. I really recommend not using SMS two-factor authentication. I know a lot of even banks kind of use it, but there are a lot of ways of kind of circumventing that. You can kind of spoof a phone number and kind of get around that through some social engineering. So I would use something like Authy or Google Authenticator. Authy had some issues kind of with that spoofing as well and some other things that I won't go into, but they have since then fixed that with their default settings. So I think those are two kind of good ones that you should use, and that's kind of what you should stick with. So be sure to activate that on any exchange that you use. I also want to address the fact that if you're not holding your keys, you don't necessarily own anything. If you're not kind of familiar, a lot of cryptocurrencies, you'll rely on this two-key cryptography, where you kind of have your public key, which is the address you can send coins to, and then you have a private key, which is kind of like the ability to unlock that safe, the ability to send those coins to whoever you want. If somebody possesses that key, that private key, they have access and control over your coins. A lot of people like exchanges because you can have 6, 7, 8 different cryptocurrencies and not have to handle all those keys. They really abstract that away from you and handle that all internally, which is very nice from like kind of an ease of use standpoint. You have to realize that you are delegating that trust to the exchange. So like I said, again, just be very cognizant of what the exchange's level of security is, what your level of trust is in that exchange. Like if they get hacked and lose all of their money, how are you going to deal with that? Is that something that you can necessarily expect? No. There are some companies that seem like they're taking security a lot more seriously. So just be aware of that when you're kind of shopping around. Like I said before, there's things like Mt. Gox and Bitfinex. Probably research those because it was where there were security issues with major exchanges. So a lot of individuals will recommend that you don't necessarily hold any more than you have to on an exchange, and kind of hold those keys yourself. But like I said, it is a trade-off. If you're not as technical, you might feel more comfortable with an exchange holding the keys than you are. Just be aware that that is that trade-off between a centralized body holding your keys, which makes a large honeypot. This kind of incentivizes hackers. If they are able to break their security or social engineer around it, they can make a lot of money. So something to be aware of. So I'm going to briefly cover kind of safe storage practices because it kind of goes hand in hand with the security that I talked about. The exact process is different for every coin. Some coins have very similar kind of storage practices and wallet setups that you can use. A few of the examples, kind of being Ethereum, and on top of that there are ERC20 tokens, which have been a lot of the most recent ICOs. So you can actually store those on the same kind of Ethereum address as you store your Ethereum. I will get more into that, more in depth to what all that means, the different kinds of tokens in the advanced class. Just not really relevant covering that necessarily here. But I do think that it's kind of important discussing hardware wallets. These are basically like tiny little devices that you can use to sign your transactions with that private key, which basically transfers them. But it doesn't actually expose your private key to the internet. You could use it on kind of the worst computer imaginable with infinite malware and wouldn't have to worry about anybody being able to swipe or kind of steal your private keys. So Trezor and Ledger are kind of two of the leaders in this hardware wallet space. There are a few others, so definitely look into that. I highly recommend using one of those or some different ones if you have a significant amount of money invested. It might kind of give you a little more peace of mind if you have things stored on that. That being said, you can't necessarily use it with all of the altcoins or all the cryptocurrencies because they haven't updated the software to support those. But for like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, a lot of those kind of coins, they do have support. So just be aware of that. I do briefly mention cold storage here. It basically means that your private keys have been generated and stored in a secure offline environment. Like I said before, anytime your private key touches a device that has access to the internet, that kind of leaves you susceptible and open for someone viewing those keys and thus stealing your token or whatever is kind of controlled or owned by that. So that is another means of kind of securing it, where you can generate and store that key and then send those coins to that wallet without kind of fear that anyone has access and can take your crypto.